This is the story of how 120 prisoners in Chile decided that, since they were in prison for political reasons, they should escape in style. The film is based on real events, and this is no joke. It all begins with a historical overview. Chile, 1988, the Pinochet dictatorship. One of Santiago's prisons is overcrowded. It holds more than 2,000 people, including 120 political prisoners. They go on hunger strike and demand to be transferred to a separate block so they don't have to sit next to those who looted, killed, and didn't red marks. In the end, their request is granted. But not all officials are thrilled. For example, Prosecutor Andrade believes that everyone should be scattered across prisons like socks in different drawers. But Colonel Harker insists, no, let them sit together. It's easier to keep an eye on them that way. As if they were children on a field trip. While the authorities argue, the prisoners settle in as if they were at home. Some repair things, some play soccer, and some dig a tunnel to freedom. Engineer Vargas, for example, is working on a project called The Country's Response. But not everything is going smoothly. He didn't get the camera he wanted, and his friend Rafael is now angry. They'll have to shout at each other through the wall. Problems of the first underground floor, so to speak. They dig carefully, according to schedule, according to drawings, and of course with paranoia. The plan is ambitious. They will dig from two sides, meeting somewhere in the center. The main thing is not to quarrel before that. But, of course, quarrels happen. Some don't trust each other, some are still angry about the failed assassination attempt on Pinochet. Well, it happens. Vargas refuses to shake Rafael's hand, as if he had voted for another candidate. But they have no choice, either dig together or stay where they are. Yes, there is another small problem. What to do with 70 tons of excavated soil? They can't throw it out on the street, and they can't hide it in their cell either. It looks like they'll have to come up with a new method, a guerrilla disposal system. Or disguise it as an anthill. A new batch of prisoners arrives, among them Oscar Lira, the son of a famous revolutionary. Human rights activist Fabiola is interested in his fate and wants to visit him, but the prosecutor is against it. Meanwhile, our heroes are already cutting a hole in the ceiling and running around the prison in search of chicken eggs and a poster to hide the traces of their homemade adventure. When everything seems to be going well, the guards arrive. To avoid being caught, the prisoners start singing loudly. And who would have thought that this choir of political prisoners would work? On the day of the meeting, it turns out that Vargas has no one left. His entire family has been killed. The atmosphere becomes even gloomier, but the guys don't give up. The television promises that opposition members will now be able to speak out officially, but the prisoners smile skeptically. Tell that to those who were taken away at gunpoint at night for a review of their case. The plan continues. They dig a hole in the wall. On the 77th day, the tunnel reaches a depth of only 2 meters, and then they realize that digging a tunnel to freedom with just the 3 of them is like building a spaceport. It won't work. They need to call for help. Oscar Lira is sent to solitary confinement for arguing with a guard. Later, he quarrels with his brother during a visit. His brother is normal and supports the regime, while Oscar is a rebel, like the rest of his family. Against this backdrop, the political situation in the country changes, and the prisoners begin to realize that if they don't hurry, their escape will end not in freedom, but in something much worse. The guys decide to expand their ranks. They recruit new conspirators, teach them secret signals, and introduce their own spy rules. During a football match, Oscar confesses to Rafael that he wants to take part in the escape. He says he figured it out himself, from the dirt under his fingernails. On the 149th day, the prisoners learn that Manuel Rodriguez's front has raided a police station. But instead of supporting the revolution, this act, according to Rafael, only exacerbated the problems and heightened suspicions. Well, when you're digging an underground tunnel in a prison, the last thing you need is extra noise and panic in the city. And just when the conspirators are up to their ears in mud on the roof, the guards decide to conduct an unscheduled search. To buy some time and avoid being caught with shovels in their hands, Rafael and his comrades stage a riot. Not an intellectual or philosophical one, but a real fight with the guards. While fists fly and batons crack, the diggers fill in the hole, change into clean clothes, and pretend they've just come back from singing lessons. The prisoners are then lined up in the courtyard, stripped to their underwear, and forced to kneel, but the spirit of revolution is not dead. They start singing. For this, Rafael was rewarded with an exclusive meeting with a guard, in a solitary cell, alone with his fists and no witnesses. Meanwhile, his wife Paulina convinces the communists outside to help him escape. But they are afraid because elections are coming soon, the first in almost 20 years. And while they hesitate, Raphael is dragged to court. The prosecutor joyfully announces the death sentence. Lawyer Fabiola, looking quite the opposite, says that all is not lost, an appeal can be filed. By the way, she has already spoken to Paulina, who has found a couple of allies willing to help from outside. Meanwhile, an emergency situation arises in the tunnel. One of the diggers loses consciousness. Raphael crawls after him through the narrow passage and pulls the poor man out into the light. This incident shows that there is just as little air in the tunnel. Something must be done. And here the communist ingenuity of the people comes into play. Using everything they can find, including a discarded motor, they assemble a ventilation system. Yes, just like that, on their knees. Later, they even manage to turn on the lights. While the prisoners are turning the tunnel into a subway, the prosecutor pushes through the idea of distributing political prisoners to different prisons. What's more, it turns out that there is an informer among them. He is kept on a short leash. He has relatives on the outside who can be intimidated. On the 524th day, a breakthrough occurs. They reach the surface and mark the exit point with paint through a pipe. Raphael notices that one of his cellmates smokes the same cigarettes as the prosecutor. Suspicious. Outside, an assistant notices the mark, but as often happens with projects, finds it in the wrong place. They dug not to the right point, but to a point 12 meters below. Paulina comes to visit and asks, how many people are running? The answer is 120. She is shocked. How will they get them all out? While they are thinking, an earthquake strikes. The diggers crawl back in panic, and the guards chase everyone out into the street. The disaster seems to have passed, but one guard notices that some people are coming out later than the others. The tunnel, although still standing, now resembles a house of cards. One more tremor and their freedom will be over. The decision is obvious. They must flee immediately. January 29, 1990. Day X. Day 567. Everyone is sitting in the common room, watching television and pretending to be interested in the news. But in reality, they are leaving the room one by one and disappearing into a secret passageway. The first prisoners are already crawling through the tunnel, which is as narrow and long as a queue at a clinic. But then our informer steps in. He notices that something is wrong and starts looking for Raphael. And then, just like in the movies, one of the prisoners loudly accuses the informer of betrayal and distracts everyone else. It's a one-man show, but it works like a charm. The final act of this prison blockbuster begins with panic. Our hero, the snitch, realizing that things are getting serious, rushes to the guards. But that's not all. He runs into Oscar Lee. A fight breaks out, and Oscar grabs the first screwdriver he can find, the main tool of any fugitive, knocks out the traitor, and drags himself into the tunnel. Meanwhile, on the surface, the escape operation begins. Accomplices outside break through the exit and start pulling prisoners out like potatoes from a sack. The bus is already waiting, the engine is warming up, and the driver is nervously looking at his watch. No one will wait for stragglers. The prisoners, now almost free, sneak toward the bridge, but one of them returns to pull Oscar out. Chaos reigns in the prison. Unexpectedly, the main informant turns out to be a disabled man in a wheelchair, who tells all the prisoners to run. Panic and noise ensue. Prisoners break out of their cells. Guards call for reinforcements and grab those who did not manage to escape. The bus leaves without Oscar. The hero who returned for him comes back empty-handed, or rather, with a sense of guilt. Oscar remains in the shower, bleeding to death. Nevertheless, some prisoners manage to escape. The radio announces that the roads are blocked and the city is under siege. Colonel Harhira learns of the result. 49 of the 120 prisoners have escaped. The news is relayed to the prosecutor, who is probably speechless for the first time in a long time. Meanwhile, the final stage of the special operation begins on the bus, the distribution of fake documents. The fugitives are dropped off in different parts of the city so that they can more easily blend into the crowd. Raphael is forced to say goodbye to his wife, just in case. She waves to him like in a melodrama, and he remains alone in the back seat, smiling. Because despite everything, tunnels, traitors, fights, earthquakes, and prosecutors, they did it. The film ends with credits revealing the fates of the characters. Some left the country, some were pardoned by the new president who came to power after the fall of the Pinochet regime. And this escape went down in history as the largest in Chile's history. If you liked this incredible escape story, like, subscribe, and stay away from screwdrivers and dictatorships. There are more exciting stories ahead.